We live in a world where the voice of the ego often drowns out the whispers of our true potential. The ego is clever, deceitful. It builds a false narrative around who we are, and it tells us that we're defined by the things we own, the positions we hold, and the praise we receive from others. But here's the truth. The ego is the very thing standing between us and the greatness we were born to achieve. If we want to truly rise above, we have to first confront that ego and understand how it operates. The ego doesn't show up as a loud, obvious force in our lives. It doesn't announce itself with bright, flashing lights. No, it sneaks in quietly, often disguised as our own voice. It convinces us that we're superior to others, that we deserve more, that we should be in control. It leads us to compare ourselves to people around us, always striving for more power, more recognition, more success, convinced that these things will finally make us feel fulfilled. But the truth is, the ego only amplifies our sense of emptiness. The more we feed it, the hungrier it gets, and the more it distances us from the very thing we seek, growth. You see, growth is not about acquiring more material possessions or accolades. It's not about being the loudest voice in the room or having the most followers. Growth happens when we let go of the belief that we need to be in control of everything. It's about surrendering the idea that we're somehow above or beyond the challenges that life throws at us. When we live through the ego, we resist change. We stay stuck in our comfort zones, afraid of failure, afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of learning. The ego wants us to stay small because small is safe. But growth only happens when we break free of that fear, when we start embracing discomfort and allowing ourselves to be uncomfortable in pursuit of something greater. The ego is the voice that tells us, don't try because you might fail. Or don't put yourself out there because what if they don't accept you? It keeps us playing small and safe, hiding from the challenges that would actually stretch us and make us better. But let me tell you something, failure isn't the enemy. In fact, failure is one of the most powerful teachers you will ever have. Failure doesn't define who you are, it reveals who you are. The ego wants you to believe that failure means something is wrong with you. But in reality, it's an essential part of the process of growth. Without it, you can't learn, you can't improve, and you can't evolve. So if you want to break free from the ego, you've got to stop running from failure and start running toward it. Now, I know it's easier said than done. We've all been there. The fear of judgment, the fear of failure, the fear of not being enough. But understand this. The ego thrives on that fear. It feeds on it. It tells us we have to protect our image, our reputation, our sense of self. But when we live through the ego, we live in a constant state of defense, always worrying about how we're perceived and what others think of us. And when you're constantly looking outward for validation, you'll never find the peace or satisfaction you're seeking. It's only when we stop looking outside of ourselves for approval and start looking within that we start to grow. We all have that voice inside us telling us to play it safe, to stay small, to stick to what's comfortable. But here's the hard truth. Comfort is the killer of greatness. If you want to unlock your true potential, you've got to be willing to step into some discomfort. You've got to be willing to take risks, to make mistakes, to fail, and to learn. Because it's in those moments of struggle and challenge that you grow the most. The ego wants you to believe that growth is about avoiding mistakes. But real growth happens when you're bold enough to make them and then learn from them. When we choose to listen to the ego, we allow it to control our lives. It keeps us trapped in a cycle of comparison, competition, and insecurity. We're constantly measuring ourselves against others, wondering if we're good enough, if we're worthy enough, if we have what it takes. But the truth is, you don't need to compare yourself to anyone. You are already enough. You were born with everything you need to succeed, but the ego will always try to convince you otherwise. It will tell you that you need more, that you need to be different, that you need to be something you're not. But that's a lie. The only thing you need to do is show up, be authentic, and keep pushing forward. The moment you stop comparing yourself to others is the moment you start living on your own terms, free from the limitations of the ego. When you start to kill the ego, you start to take control of your life. You stop letting fear dictate your actions. You stop letting the opinions of others shape your decision. You stop allowing the false narratives of the ego to control your mindset and behavior. And in that freedom, you begin to grow. You begin to evolve into the person you were meant to be, not the person the ego wants you to be. But let's be real, this is a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and suddenly be free of ego. It's going to take time, effort, and a whole lot of self-awareness. But if you're willing to put in the work, to confront the ego head on, and to shed the layers of fear, pride, and insecurity, you will begin to see change. You will start to feel lighter, freer, and more aligned with your true self. So I challenge you today, right now, to stop listening to the ego. Stop letting it dictate your worth and your potential. Stop measuring yourself by the standards of others. Let go of the fear that keeps you small and step into the discomfort that leads to growth. The moment you do that, you will unlock a power within you that you didn't even know existed. Your growth is waiting on the other side of your ego. Kill that ego and you'll see just how far you can go. Humility, let me tell you, is a power. It's not weakness. And it's certainly not about being passive or letting people walk over you. Humility is the quiet strength that allows you to be confident in your abilities, but never arrogant. To know your worth, but not to need validation from others. When you learn humility, you stop needing to prove yourself to anyone. You stop getting caught up in what others think and start focusing on what you can contribute. There's a misconception that to be successful, you have to show up as the loudest person in the room. The world tells you that in order to get noticed, you have to be brash, bold, and make sure everyone knows just how great you are. But true greatness doesn't come from seeking the spotlight. It comes from knowing when to step back and let others shine. It comes from having the wisdom to see that life is not about collecting accolades and showing off. It's about serving others, about lifting others up, and understanding that there's always something new to learn. That's humility. When you live through humility, you're able to connect with people on a deeper level. You're no longer judging others based on where they're from, what they've done, or what they have. You start to see people for who they really are, not for the masks they wear or the status they project. And that's where real relationships are built. When you approach others, not with an agenda or an expectation, but with an open heart, ready to learn from them, ready to grow with them. Humility doesn't mean you diminish your talents or your achievements. It doesn't mean you shrink yourself down to make others feel comfortable. Humility is about recognizing that no matter how much you know, there's always more to learn. No matter how successful you become, there's always someone who can teach you something. Humility is understanding that everyone has a story and everyone has value, regardless of what the world says. It's about being grounded in who you are and knowing that your value doesn't come from your possessions, your job title, or how much you can brag. Your value comes from the heart, from the way you treat others, from the legacy you build through your actions, and from the lives you touch. When we live through humility, we become open to growth. We stop closing ourselves off from new ideas, new experiences, and new perspectives. The ego loves to keep us isolated, telling us that we're better off on our own, that we don't need anyone else, that we have all the answers. But the reality is that we don't. No one does. The moment you think you know it all is the moment you stop learning and the moment you stop growing. Humility keeps us hungry in a pursuit of excellence. It keeps us curious, always seeking, always asking, always learning. Humility also means being willing to fail and learn from those failures. The ego hates failure. It tells you that failure is a reflection of your worth, that it makes you less than. But humility understands that failure is a part of the process. It's a lesson. It's a stepping stone. When you can approach failure with humility, you take away its power over you. You stop seeing it as something to avoid and start seeing it as an opportunity to grow. And that's where true strength lies. Not in avoiding failure, but embracing it, learning from it, and using it to fuel your next move. This world is full of people who are trying to be seen, trying to prove that they matter, trying to convince others that they have what it takes. But those who truly make an impact are the ones who don't need to prove anything. They lead with humility. They don't show up with an ego-driven agenda. They show up with a desire to serve, to help, and to contribute. The ego wants to take from others. It wants to consume. But humility gives. It serves without asking for anything in return. It lifts others up and empowers them to rise higher. The greatest leaders throughout history were not the ones who made the most noise. They weren't the ones shouting the loudest or demanding attention. They were the ones who inspired through their actions, through their quiet confidence, and through their ability to listen and learn. Humility is the foundation of true leadership. Because when you lead with humility, people follow you not because of your title or your position, but because they believe in your character, your integrity, and your willingness to serve them. When you can step into the world with humility, you stop worrying about who gets credit and start focusing on the work itself. You stop seeking praise and start seeking results. Humility frees you from the need to always be recognized, always be acknowledged. You do the work because it matters, not because it'll earn you applause. And when you approach life with that mindset, you will start to notice that opportunities begin to find you. Success comes not because you chased it, but because you were focused on doing the right thing with the right heart. We all have egos. It's part of being human. But the real question is, how much control does your ego have over you? Humility is not about rejecting your ego entirely. It's about not letting it dominate your life, about keeping it in check so that it doesn't drive every decision you make. When you operate from humility, you're able to make decisions based on what's best for the people around you, not just what's best for yourself. You begin to look for ways to give instead of ways to take. You start to build, to create, to serve without worrying about who will notice. At the end of the day, it's not about how much you have or how much you've accomplished. It's about how much you've given, how many people you've helped, how much you've loved. Humility is the key to building those kinds of relationships, to creating a legacy that lasts long after you're gone. When you live through humility, you create a ripple effect that spreads far beyond your own life. So as you move forward, let humility be your guide. Let it be the driving force behind everything you do. Serve, give, and love without expectation. Be confident in who you are, but always stay grounded in the understanding that we are all learning, growing, and evolving together. And remember, humility is not a sign of weakness. It is the quiet strength that will carry you further than your ego ever could. Humility is the key to lasting greatness. Your identity is not your ego. Let me say that again. Your identity is not your ego. So many people walk around thinking that they are defined by their job title, their accomplishments, the car they drive, or the money they make, but none of that is who you truly are. Those are just things you've done, things you've achieved, or things you've accumulated, but they are not the essence of your being. The truth is, your identity is something much deeper, much more profound than anything the world could ever give you or take away from you. The ego wants you to believe that your worth is attached to the things you own, the titles you hold, or the approval you get from others. It thrives on external validation. It pushes you to constantly chase more followers, more money, more success, because it wants to tie your value to the fleeting and external. It makes you think that the more you have, the more you are. But here's the truth. No amount of success, no amount of possessions, and no number of accolades will ever fill the void of not knowing who you truly are at your core. I know so many people who climb to the top of the mountain, who achieve everything they thought would make them happy, and yet when they get there, they feel empty inside. Why? because they've attached their sense of self to something external. They believe the lie that if they reached a certain level of success, they would finally be whole, that their worth would finally be recognized. But when they arrive, they realize that the success, the money, and the recognition didn't bring them fulfillment. They were still the same person they were before, searching for something that was never going to be found in the material world. True identity comes from within. It comes from understanding that your value is not tied to what you do, but to who you are. You are not defined by the titles you hold, the number of people who follow you, or the material things you collect. You are not what you do for a living or how much money you make. Those are just things you do or have, not who you are at your core. So who are you? You are someone who has unique gifts, talents, and potential. You are someone who has a purpose on this earth that is bigger than anything external. Your true identity lies in your ability to connect with others, to serve, and to create positive change. It lies in the values you hold and the way you show up in the world, not in the possessions you own or the titles you carry. This is why the ego is so dangerous. It distorts our understanding of who we are, and it leads us to chase things that are not aligned with our true purpose. The ego wants us to compete with others, to compare ourselves, and to constantly seek approval. But when we make our worth dependent on these external factors, we miss the point. We miss the opportunity to build a true and lasting identity based on our inner strength, our integrity, and our ability to make a difference in the world. When you know who you are, when you're grounded in your true identity, you no longer need to compare yourself to others. You stop measuring your worth against the successes and failures of the people around you. You stop looking outside for validation because you already know that you are enough. This is what true freedom looks like. Freedom from the ego's need to be recognized. Freedom from the fear of not measuring up. And freedom from the chains of comparison. The ego will try to convince you that you are not enough, that you need to be more like someone else, that you need to achieve more in order to matter. But that's a lie. You matter right now as you are. Your identity is not about what you've done or what you will do. It's about who you are right at this very moment. And who you are is more than enough. When you start living from a place of understanding your true identity, you stop chasing things that don't serve you. You stop wasting your energy on things that are not aligned with your purpose. You stop pursuing success for the sake of success and start pursuing success that aligns with your values and your mission in life. You begin to understand that success is not just about getting ahead. It's about making an impact, living with integrity, and using your gifts to serve others. Your identity is not based on your achievements. It's based on your ability to show up authentically, to live in alignment with your values, and to be true to yourself, no matter what anyone else, the world may try to label you, the world may try to tell you who you are, but at the end of the day, you get to decide who you are and what you stand for. When you are grounded in your true identity, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to convince others of your worth. Your worth is not up for debate. It's a constant, unwavering truth that comes from within. This is why it's so important to understand that your identity is not your ego. The ego thrives on external validation, but your true self thrives on internal alignment. When you align yourself with your purpose, your values, and your authentic self, nothing can shake you. You become unshakable, unmovable, because you know who you are and you know your worth. So stop measuring yourself by the standards of others. Stop letting the ego dictate your worth. You are not what you have. You are not what you do. You are more than that. You are a person of infinite potential, of boundless possibility. Your identity is something deeper than what the world can see or measure. It's something that comes from within, from your heart, from your soul. When you begin to live from that place, you will experience a level of peace and fulfillment that the ego can never offer. Your true identity is the foundation of everything you will achieve. It's the driving force behind your purpose, your actions, and your legacy. When you understand who you truly are, nothing can hold you back. Your identity is not your ego. The ego thrives on self-interest. It wants us to believe that the world revolves around us, that everything we do should be for our benefit, that our success, our happiness, our wealth should be the only things that matter. It's easy to get caught up in this mindset, especially in a world that constantly tells us to focus on me, mine, and what's in it for me. But here's the thing, true fulfillment, true success, and true happiness don't come from serving yourself. They come from serving others. When we focus solely on ourselves, we live in a bubble. The ego keeps us isolated, and we miss the opportunity to connect with others, to learn from them, to support them, and to make a real difference in their lives. But when you shift your focus from what's best for me to how can I help others, something incredible happens. You begin to step into a higher purpose, a greater calling. And in the process, you unlock a level of joy, peace, and fulfillment that the ego could never offer. Serving others is the key to unlocking your true potential. Think about it for a moment. When you give without expecting anything in return, when you pour into others with no agenda, that's when you experience the deepest sense of satisfaction. It's not about recognition. It's not about accolades or praise. It's about knowing that your actions, your words, and your contributions have made a difference in someone else's life. That's the kind of fulfillment the ego can't grasp because it's focused on taking, not giving. We live in a world where everyone is competing for attention, for success, for validation. It's easy to get caught up in the race. The truth is, the more you focus on serving others, the more you will receive in return. It might not always be in the form of material wealth, but it will come in ways that matter most, in the relationships you build, in the lives you touch, and in the sense of peace that comes from knowing you are living with purpose. Here's what happens when you serve others. You stop worrying about yourself. You stop getting stuck in your own head, in your own fears, and your own insecurities. You start looking outward, seeing the needs of the people around you and figuring out how you can meet those needs. This is what true leadership is about. Leadership is not about being in charge, not about having control, not about being the one who makes all the decisions. Leadership is about serving others, empowering them, lifting them up, and helping them become the best version of themselves. When you shift your focus to serving others, you start to see that there is so much more to life than your own struggles, your own fears, and your own desires. You realize that your life has purpose beyond your own success. You begin to see the potential in those around you and start to support them in realizing their own potential. This is the true measure of success, not how much you accumulate for yourself, but how much you help others grow. But serving others doesn't always mean grand gestures. It doesn't always mean doing something big or dramatic. Sometimes serving others is as simple as offering a kind word, listening without judgment, showing up when someone needs you, or giving a helping hand without expecting anything in return. The ego wants you to believe that you have to do something extraordinary to make a difference. But the truth is, the small acts of kindness and service are often the ones that have the greatest impact. When you're focused on service, you don't need to seek validation because you know that what you're doing is meaningful. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're not doing it for praise. You're doing it because it's the right thing to do. And in that, you find a kind of peace that the ego could never provide. The ego thrives on seeking approval from others. Serving others comes from a place of pure, selfless action. When you serve without expecting anything in return, you step into a power that is beyond ego. Serving others also teaches you humility. It reminds you that you are not the center of the universe. It reminds you that there are people who need you, people who are depending on you, and that you have a responsibility to show up for them. Serving others is a constant reminder that life is not about you. It's about what you can give, how you can contribute, and how you can make the world a better place. The more you serve, the less room the ego has to take control, because serving others puts everything into perspective. You realize that your success is not just for you, it's for the people you can help along the way. And this isn't just about people in need. Serving others doesn't only apply to those who are struggling or going through hard times. It applies to everyone you come across. You never know what someone else is going through, what battles they're fighting, what dreams they're working towards. Sometimes just being there for someone, giving them a word of encouragement or helping them see the possibility of a brighter future can change everything for them. And in doing so, you change everything for yourself too.